now, so we'll go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everybody to our MLAC meeting. I know we have many folks, I guess, now virtually, so welcome. Can everybody hear us online? Thumbs up or comment or somebody?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. So for folks that are here in person, we have materials that we're going to be using in the meeting in the back, so make sure you can grab a copy of those. My name is Scott Strickland. I'm the labor co-chair and will be chairing this meeting. I want to thank everyone for making the trip out and thank everyone from the community and elsewhere from showing up. It's important that we get information together and get that out to the members of the community that are actually impacted by a lot of these things. So I want to thank DCBS folks for putting this together as well, making sure that we got everything out here for the trek and can be joined online as well. So first, I have a public comment. We have a public comment period that we hold in the beginning of the meeting in case anybody has something of interest to bring forth to the committee. So I'll happily do that now if there is any public comment. No raised hands, no people charging the mic. So next on the agenda, I see the review of minutes from our August 1st meeting. I hear a motion to approve as distributed to us. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
I see a second. Any discussion? No discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? And any abstaining?
Okay.
Yep. Oh, I guess you do roll call as well, right?
We should do that.
So we'll do roll call.
Okay. Sarah Duckwall is here. Ryan Hearn.
Present.
Stacy Llewellyn.
She's absent.
Oh, she is absent, okay. And Patrick is on his way. Ken Schlesinger.
Here.
There we go.
Okay. Sarah Merrick. Do not see her. Okay. Scott Strickland.
Here.
Margaret Woodall. And Lauren Bowen.
Here.
And Director Stolfi is not able to join us today.
Okay. So next on the agenda, I see department updates. And the first one that I see is Workers' Compensation Board case law updates. And I believe it's Sarah Larson that will be presenting that.
Hi, thanks co-chairs, members of MLAC for letting me sit in on behalf of the board today. And we have no updates, so that's it.
That
Okay,
works.
thank you. Next, I see Workers' Compensation Division update, if any, from Terry.
And the only thing I have to update is the 2024 calendar. We have this meeting today. The meeting in November 7th is in Salem in conference room 260. And the meeting is December 5th in 260. So those are the updates to this calendar. And then I also sent out a draft 2025 calendar. And I would like everybody to let me know if everybody's good with that. We start the legislative session. And so we have weekly meetings. And I believe it was Stacy that asked me to get this out as soon as possible. So if we could review it and approve it, then I'll start sending out the meeting invites next week. So we get them on everybody's calendar.
Terry, just a clarification point, that if those weekly meetings are not necessary, we can cancel them?
Yes,
Okay, but just as
absolutely.
placeholders to make sure we can cover everything. Perfect.
I know one other thing, we had questions about lining this up with the legislative deadlines as well
Yes.
to make sure, and we've done that. And
Mhm.
okay, yeah, I see your marks
Yeah.
on your page.
Yes.
Let's prove it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know that we need a formal motion,
No.
but I hear a motion in a
Yeah,
second.
Yeah.
All those in favor? Aye.
Sure.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Okay. And again, this is subject to change with the needs of stakeholders and everything else. So if you are a stakeholder and need time to present, if you're, legislator, have questions, any of that, we encourage people to engage early and often.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, so next on the agenda, I see Workers' Compensation Division presentation with Matt West.
Morning.
Morning.
All right. Good morning, Co-Chair Strickland, members of MLAC. Yeah. All right. For the record, my name is Matt West. I'm the interim administrator here at the Workers' Compensation Division. I'm here to give a brief overview of the Workers' Comp Division and the work we do, a little bit about the Workers' Comp system in Oregon, for those that maybe are not as familiar, unfortunately, because it's really, we had an all-staff meeting yesterday and I said, workers' compensation is cool. And I feel like that's trending now. So I'm going to just go with it. Workers' compensation is cool. Our mission at the Workers' Comp Division is to ensure an equitable workers' compensation system for all. And so really what that means is that we want to ensure that when an injury occurs, workers are taken care of, while also keeping costs down on the employer side. So we don't bankrupt the system or put employers out of business. That's never the goal. We have a great team at WCD, 175 strong, really passionate about that mission and having that system that's based in balance and fairness, and appreciate everything that MLAC does to help ensure that, as well as you all are listening to propose changes to the system, keeping in mind that balance is key. So for us, we really, the division has two primary customers, subject workers and employers. But we also interact with a number of other stakeholders, including insurers, self-insured employers, service companies, medical providers, vocational providers, and attorneys. We have a very successful system in Oregon. It's pretty difficult to compare systems across the U.S. because every jurisdiction has different laws and rules, maybe different levels of compensation, different medical costs, fee schedules. So it's kind of neat, though. In 1986, our DCBS research team came up with what's called the premium rate ranking study, where they found a way to compare premiums across jurisdictions. It's one measure, sort of look at how the different states compare in premium costs for employers. The study is conducted every 2 years. It's nationally recognized. We have other jurisdictions that anxiously await the study to kind of see how they compare and where they've moved as far as that cost. And so the latest study was put out in 2022, and in that study, Oregon was the 10th lowest cost system in premiums in the voluntary market. So employers in the voluntary market in Oregon pay the 10th lowest workers' compensation rates, which is pretty good. Prior to in the 90s, 80s, 90s, Oregon was one of the most expensive states in the nation, and so to get kind of in the top 10 as far as lowest cost is a big deal. And MLAC has a lot to do with that. I'll talk a little about MLAC in a bit. So the workers' compensation system in Oregon has existed since 1914. Many changes have been made to the system since then, but today's system still reflects that original agreement between management and labor, which is to have a no-fault system for workplace injuries. Today's system has affordability for employers, good benefits and outcomes for workers. An Oregon model has been very successful and studied and emulated by other states as well. This slide lists the statutory objectives of the workers' compensation system. And our division supports these objectives in a number of ways. I'll name a few. By conducting investigations to ensure that employers maintain workers' compensation coverage. We certify self-insured employers, which includes ensuring that they have the financial means to self-insure their claim obligations. We ensure that workers receive accurate and timely benefits, that injured workers receive quality medical care by certifying and monitoring managed care organizations and their contracts, responding to inquiries, and developing medical fee schedules. We also facilitate early return to work programs for injured workers by offering incentive programs for employers. And one of my colleagues, Christy Johnson's here. She's going to give an overview of our return to work program. So I won't get into that too much. I don't want to steal her thunder.
Oh, it's okay, go ahead.
We also create reference materials, publications, offer conferences and other training opportunities to educate those in the system, employers, workers, insurers, anybody in the system. We're trying to make sure that they're well informed and well educated of how workers' comp works in Oregon. And we also have, staff members that provide stellar customer service, answer complex questions related to benefits, processing claims, explaining rights, responsibilities. And then it's not part of the workers' compensation division, but you'll also hear today from two other offices that play a big part of DCBS, but a big part of the workers' compensation system in the Ombuds Office for Oregon Workers and the Small Business Ombudsman. I won't steal their thunder either. So our division is broken up into 5 sections, main sections, and within each section there are different units. I won't go too granular, but just kind of a brief overview of what each section does. So our administration section provides leadership, policy direction for the division and the system, and then also handles our budget, among other things. Our operations section provides business support to the rest of the division. It's also our claims and records unit. So you'll hear I'll talk a little bit about our modernization program, but just so you all know, I like to plug modernization as much as possible. And here's a good example is our claims team. Claims are currently reported to the division in the mail on paper, and we have a team that manually data enters all the claim information into the system. It's 2024, so I would imagine there's technology that can help with some of that. So
At least a teletype.
Yeah. So we are. I'll talk about our modernization program. It's just one of the good examples of why we're modernizing our system to have, and you all know when pulling claim data, there's often a delay, or not all claims are reported to us currently, and so in order for decision making, policy making, it's important to have accurate, timely data. So that'll help with that as well. Our operations section also has our policy team, so they handle rule development and policy analysis, and then also outreach and education. Then our performance section is kind of the enforcement section, the enforcement of certain laws, workers' comp laws related to employer coverage, self-insurance, claims processing, timely and accurate benefits, like I mentioned, worker leasing. So that's all within our performance section. And then our resolution section resolves different disputes related to medical fees or treatment issues, vocational assistance, disability claim closure, permanent and partial disability entitlement. And then also within our resolution program is our return to work programs, employer injury program and preferred worker program, and our vocational assistance program. And the last, but certainly not least, is our modernization section. A team of 3 right now. We have some contractors that help with us and some resources in our IT department as well. But their goal really is to evaluate, improve, and modernize WCD's processes and systems. They coordinate with DAS and EIS, which is Enterprise Information Services, and others that have oversight on technology projects within state government to help us implement technology changes and projects. And then they also have a big role in supporting WCD staff and in preparing them for a new system and process changes. Change is hard, especially when we've had a legacy system for so long. So we have, a change management analyst and that's working really hard to help prepare our folks for a new era in WCD. One thing I think it's important to mention, Oregon system, what's a little different than maybe some other systems. We have a dual jurisdiction system in Oregon. So WCD, we administer and regulate workers' compensation laws and rules. I always like to note, I'm sure you're all aware of this, we're not an insurer, we don't process claims. Employers in Oregon have 3 options when it comes to workers' compensation and insurance coverage. One option is Safe Corporation, which is an independent public corporation created by statute for the purpose of transacting workers' compensation insurance and reinsurance business in Oregon. It's one option for Oregon employers. There are also other private insurance carriers. There's over 300 carriers in Oregon that employers can look to for coverage. And then the third option is self-insurance. There are currently 93 active self-insured employers in Oregon. And we have a role in certifying them and ensuring that, as I mentioned, that they have the financial stability to be a self-insured employer. So the Workers' Compensation Board, it's a separate entity from the workers' compensation system. The dual jurisdiction really refers to kind of a dispute resolution system in which some disputes may come to the division before they go to the board, and then some issues go straight to the board depending on what's at issue. So the division, first, we have jurisdiction in disputes related, as I mentioned earlier, to medical services and fees, claim closure, permanent partial disability, vocational assistance. And so we have different reviewers within the division that resolve these disputes through an administrative review process. And also an alternative dispute resolution process. If we can get the parties together to look for another way to resolve the dispute, we try to do that. And then appeals typically go over to the Workers' Compensation Board, appeals of our orders. And then the Workers' Compensation Board has jurisdiction over matters in which the worker's right to receive compensation or the amount thereof are directly at issue. So, for example, compensability, either initial claim compensability, or new or omitted conditions or aggravation. So if a claim's denied, that goes straight to the Workers' Compensation Board. That's where that appeal would go to. Also, temporary disability rates or entitlement to temporary disability goes to the board. Issues related to employee versus independent contractor go to the board, and many more. It's just we have kind of that. It's very high level, but if you have any questions, happy to answer any questions related to that. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention and cover is you all, MLAC, right? This is a unique part of the Oregon system, Management Labor Advisory Committee, who provides this forum for labor and business to resolve issues within the workers' compensation system, explore and discuss potential changes. So for those that may not be aware, MLAC was born out of the 1990 Mahonia Hall reforms. It really transformed Oregon's workers' compensation system. As I mentioned, at that point in time, it was one of the most expensive systems in the country, and now we're one of the most affordable. It's important to note that while we are one of the most affordable, we still have strong benefits for workers. So it's not at a cost to the worker that the system is more affordable. So MLAC, made up of 5 labor representatives and 5 management representatives, who provide advice to the Oregon legislature and the governor about legislative and other proposals. You all are aware of the common set of values, but for those that maybe aren't on the slide, these are the things, when a bill is introduced related to workers' comp, MLAC is really looking at, balance, fairness, adequacy of benefits, and the other principles listed on the screen there, while weighing that whether or not a legislative change should go forward. More than likely, if a proposed change is going to get any serious consideration at the legislature, it comes through MLAC first. And MLAC's really a resource for those that are listening, for anybody who has issues within the workers' compensation system. This is a great venue to discuss those and vet those out. So that's my brief overview of kind of WCB, the workers' compensation system in Oregon. Happy to answer any questions that you all have. Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't want to put you on the spot. It really is a question for Stolpe, Andrew. But you have a title of interim.
Yes.
And what's the process, or where is that process at for coming out with a permanent director?
That's a great question, and one that I get asked often. So it really is a question for Director Stolpe. My understanding is there's a recruitment pending. It's going to open soon, so they'll go through a process to decide who the next administrator will be. I don't know the timeline on that. I haven't been given that, but that's as much as I know. We can note the question, and Andrew can respond as well. Yeah. You can copy me on that. No. Yeah. Any other questions?
don't see any online.
Yeah, any questions online or anybody attending here have questions? Not put anybody on the spot.
Just like to say, great overview.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that was really educational for somebody who doesn't know the inner workings of Oregon Workers Comp, so.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and again, happy to provide any in-depth additional information if needed at any point in time. We're here to support the work you do, and just want to close by thanking you all for just, I know you're volunteering your time, and it's really important. We look to MLAC for advice as well, so just really appreciate what you all do for the workers' compensation system. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And I know we have a bunch of good materials on the MLAC website too about how to bring a legislative concept to MLAC, what MLAC does, what our perspective is. So, yeah. All right. Thank you. Next up, I see WCD Preferred Worker Program with Christy Johnson.
Hello, thank you for having me. Usually I'm addressing a crowd. Having my back to a crowd.
If you want, yeah, I don't know if we have a seat available.
It's okay, I
You
can sit
sit
here
up
just
there
now,
and,
and this is
yeah.
for you as well. Especially the community out there, I'm sure you as MLAC members, excuse me, thank you for having me here, know about it, but really what we want to do is, as the title says, this is Oregon's best kept secret. There's a lot of people that do not understand the benefits available through the Preferred Worker Program. Matt talked about it a little bit. This is one of the programs that was designed through the Mahoning Hall Act to reduce workers' comp costs and to bring injured workers back to work, have employers not be afraid to hire somebody who was injured on the job. So that's how this was developed. And I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Christy Johnson, and I have been with Preferred Worker Program almost 26 years, just the program. So I can answer any questions you might have. And if I can't, then Matt can.
I did send out your one pager, so.
Oh, okay, so everybody did get a copy of the fact summary sheet. Okay, that just, this program, I'm gonna give a super high overview of it, and you're gonna walk out of here with a lot more questions and answers. So I just kind of wanted everybody to have an opportunity to review it and then to ask any questions you might have. Okay, the objective again of the Preferred Worker Program is to encourage safe and suitable employment for people who have been injured on the job. The Preferred Worker Program is actually split into two. We also have an employer at injury program. So if we have an employer whose worker has been injured on the job, a lot of these programs that I'm going to talk about can be implemented as the employer at injury. So we don't actually take away from the worker benefit itself, but we just want to make sure that everybody is happy and healthy and ready to come back to work. And we have employers that are ready to hire them. The Preferred Worker Program does have dedicated funding. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of the Worker Benefit Fund. Everybody here in this room, if you are employed, not self-employed, actually pays into the Worker Benefit Fund. It's the cents per hour tax. The employer pays a penny and the worker pays a penny. That I think came out of the Mahoning Hall Act as well. So it is, our program is dedicated funding through the Worker Benefit Fund. We're not robbing Peter to pay Paul. If you have a preferred worker that actually is injured on the job, that money has their name on it. If they don't use it, it sits in that fund and it just accrues interest. So that's why we encourage people to use it. The main people that really are eligible for this program, honestly, are the ones that are out there working the hardest, right? I mean, they're more physically demanding jobs, which means they work most of their life and they don't want to feel like they're taking a service. So we have to really push the fact that this is money dedicated for them. So it's kind of nice we have that dedicated funding. These are some other programs that are paid for out of the Worker Benefit Fund. I personally can't answer to many of them. Matt and Barb Anderson, who's here, they might be able to, if you have any questions about it, they could answer some of those for you. Okay, so who becomes eligible for the Preferred Worker Program? So a person who becomes eligible for the program is someone who has permanent restrictions and can't do that exact job that they had at the time of injury. It doesn't mean that they can't return to that job. It could just be that they have an hourly restriction, a minor lifting restriction, or they end up with a major injury. It just runs the gambit. But again, it's just permanent restrictions that prevent them from returning to their exact job. So once you become a preferred worker, many of the benefits are focused around what the worker needs to get back to work. Whether they've been on a workers' comp claim, which we all know nobody gets rich on a workers' comp claim. You know, I mean, they got up, they went to work, they got hurt, they've been off work. Now we need to get them back to work. So we have many benefits available to help remove those obstacles to employment. We have a clothing benefit. You are going to see two different dollar amounts there. One is going to be the lifetime use of, we'll take for instance, clothing. A preferred worker has up to $1,000 total to use for clothing benefits for the lifetime of their working career. It's not much. Mainly it's used really in the very beginning when they come back to work because they've been off work, they've either gained weight, they've lost weight, you know, there's other factors involved. So we say you have a one-time use of $500. So if, you know, for instance, if you're, you know, going back into the workforce, everything's expensive now. Shoes, clothes, you name it, it's expensive. So you have up to $500 one-time use, with a remainder of another $500 to get you through the rest of your career. Tools and equipment, this category runs the gambit. It just depends on the industry in which somebody is going back to work in. I have a guy who just got hired as a maintenance worker, and I just got him set up with a whole bunch of tools, $2,500 worth of tools. So that was pretty cool, actually, for him. As a matter of fact, last night, I met a preferred worker at Coastal because under the tool and equipment category, we can also pay for PPE, which is personal protective equipment, and he's a rancher. He actually lives in Grass Valley, so he had quite a drive. But anyway, so I bought him a bunch of clothes under $500, and then we went and got him rain gear, boots, and the other items that he needs. So the rain gear and boots, obviously very expensive. You know, I think I spent $750, you know, and then you've got the $500 for clothing, which Carhartts, jackets, you know, it's expensive. So we did that last night. That was pretty cool. Then we have training that's available. And again, that just depends. It can be Excel training. I just paid for one of my workers who works for a water treatment plant to go to the OSHA conference that was just in Bend. So I paid for the OSHA conference, I paid for him to attend the training, and then I also paid for him to stay at a hotel and per diem. Moving, that's our only category that doesn't have an actual cost to it. That's poundage. The reason why we offer moving assistance is because obviously you've been injured on the job. We don't want you lifting anything. We don't want you carrying anything. So we'll hire a moving company to come in and do it. 10,000 pounds or under. You also have to be, you have to be 50 miles from where you live to where your new employer is. So within Oregon. Again, we only stay in Oregon. So we don't use that benefit very much, but when people do use it, they're really happy to have it. Occupational certification, that usually goes along with training. But under that one, we do a lot of ODOT medical cards. We do, well, we actually help for anything that the industry needs them to be certified for, we'll pay for. CPR, you know, it really just depends. Union dues, we don't have a lot of those, but if somebody had been in the union, got injured, had to quit paying their union dues, we'll pay any back dues. So we'll get them present and then 1 month dues. Transportation, that's a big one. You know, if you have to either get tires or pay a bill because you've been off work due to an injury, you're going to pay that bill, right? You're not going to put tires on your car. You're not going to put brakes, fix your brakes. You're going to go as long as you can. But when you get a job, that vehicle has to be, you know, has to get you to and from, and that employer has to know that you are dependable. So we want to make sure that we come in there and we put the new tires, do the brakes, do whatever we can. It's only $1,000, but it's helpful to get them going. Excuse me. Ooh, jinx. Okay, so the miscellaneous category. This is a special category for us. It's it is the only category you can use pre-employment. So under the miscellaneous category, if we know you're out there, you're looking for work, we can help you with interview clothes. We can help you with gas mileage to get to and from your interview. We can help with eyeglasses. That is why we have the eyeglass symbol up there. We do a lot of eye exams and eyeglasses. So this miscellaneous, it covers anything that's not covered in the rules, sort of. And we get asked a lot of different questions if we can access it. Because our goal throughout this entire program is to get to yes, you know? So we get asked a lot of crazy questions. Employer benefits, this was a big one. So when you're a preferred worker, if the employer lets us know within 90 days that they've hired a preferred worker, then we activate what's called premium exemption. And what that means is the employer does not report payroll to their work comp carrier. So for 3 years, when the insurance company comes to do an audit, that payroll is not a part of it. The reason why it's not a part of it is because they're eligible for claims cost reimbursement. So if there is a new injury during those 3 years, we will cover any and all claim costs associated with that, which is huge for an employer, right? Because that it won't affect your experience rating. So the claim will get processed as normal, and then at the end of that claim, the insurance company is going to request reimbursement. We're going to pay it, and it will be as if you didn't have a claim. So if you have a savvy employer out there, they understand the true value of that, which also helps keeps our cost down. Okay, so the other big benefit is wage subsidy. So we can reimburse half the worker's salary for 6 months. So that's a big one. That's the big one that employers see them, you know, they find the biggest value in that because they see the monthly, you know, check that we send to them for 6 months. So that's a big one. Worksite creation, I consider this like a wonderful grant for an employer. The guy who I just bought the tools from, who's a maintenance worker, this is a new position for this particular company, Rose Cleaning Company, I think out of Portland. As a matter of fact, Caitlin helped this employer because she took out what's called an NCCI policy, and it's the only policy in the nation where if you hire a preferred worker, it's $160 to take out the policy. So it's $160 a year for a policy. So for a small employer like herself, who only has a preferred worker, that completely helps her bottom line and is able to expand her business. Then we came in with worksite creation, and we're going to buy her whatever she needs to get it going. The worksite creation category is also unique in that anything that we purchase under this category becomes the property of the employers, because it was created for the employer to hire a preferred worker, and then we want to make sure they're all set up so this employer has a job and can get going, just like this lady who has the maintenance company. So it's pretty neat. Worksite modification. Our program is split into two. I am a specialist. I do everything else. And then the worksite modification consultants do just that. I like to say that because it makes me sound important. But most people a lot of people are super interested in the modification piece. I would like to speak more to it, but I can't because I don't do it every day. But there's a total of $50,000 for a worker to access lifetime with a $35,000 cost. So it could be a forklift. It could be something as simple as a chair. It just runs the gambit. It just depends on what the worker's restrictions are, what the job duties are, and how we can come in and help make that worker comfortable and safe and working within their restrictions.
And do these things typically also become property of the employer? So it's sort of setting the employer up to be able to engage in this on an ongoing basis?
That's a very good question. Yeah, so like a forklift, because they have to insure and maintain it, we would assign it to that employer. But these things are truly designed so that the worker has them available to them when they come to work, so they are working safe and within their restrictions. But if they're not there, then anybody can use them too. So we just got to make sure that they're accessible to the worker. Any other questions? And that's me. Yes.
You began by saying that the preferred worker program was like the least utilized, or it was really
Oregon's best kept secret.
Oregon's best kept secret. Why?
Have you heard of it? I mean, you have because you're MLAC. I mean, you have, but I mean, a lot of employers, I think a lot of people in the community haven't heard about it. And we try every way we can to get the word out, but we just have to keep coming out here and talking about it because for one thing, we need employers to understand to not be afraid to hire somebody who's been injured on the job. Okay, but you also can't ask, have you been injured on the job, right? When you're in an interview. So if we can get employers to understand what the preferred worker program is, we can get them to recruit indicating that they hire preferred workers. Then that conversation can be had once they get hired.
Is there any communication with the employer through the preferred benefit program that reminds the employer whenever there is a disabling claim, it might be permanent restrictions? Do you have that kind of communication with the employers?
We don't with the employers, but we do with the insurer. That's really where the insurer would come in and they would help with bringing that injured worker back to work and educating the employer on what it means to have somebody who has permanent restrictions.
What benefit is it to the insurer to cooperate in that?
That is a good question. A premium exemption. I mean, we have SAFE, for instance. I work very closely with SAFE. I have a direct contact there, and all their disabling claims that they end up bringing their worker back, like the employer brings their injured worker back, we immediately get premium exemption started. So, in the event that they have another injury, that worker is covered, as is their insured. And then we do wage subsidy reimbursement and worksite modification.
And does the worker have to make application to become a preferred worker?
That's also a very good question. They become a preferred worker two different ways, either manual or automatically through the notice of closure process. So if they have PPD and permanent partial disability, and that worksheet associated with the NOC indicates that they have restrictions due to the on-the-job injury, then a card will automatically get issued. Notice of closure, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. We love acronyms. We love acronyms. Thank you for that. And then if they do a claims disposition agreement, which is a settlement through the board, if they do a claims disposition agreement before they do the notice of closure, then we send a letter out to that injured worker, letting them know to call us, and we can do a manual eligibility for them. And then we get the medical records from the insurance company, and we determine that automatically for them, manually. We try really hard. We call everybody that we can to get notified. You're kind of in a pickle in terms of letting an employer know who is a preferred worker, right? I mean, they're not a protected class, but they're also an injured worker. So it's kind of a balancing act. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I had one question. I think there's somebody back there.
I think there's a couple in the back.
questions,
So you
Yeah,
want
I'm
to go
so sorry,
first
my
and then
back
we'll
is
poll.
I don't mind.
Go ahead.
I can go ahead and ask my question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry that I was a little bit late.
Oh, you're
You may
fine.
have answered this question, but it was very fascinating what I heard. I was really interested. I was curious, how much is collected to fund this program in a normal year, and how much do you spend in a normal year?
That is above my pay grade, but I will tell you how it is funded. It is funded through the cents per hour tax, the WBF, that you see on your paycheck. So a worker pays a penny every hour and the employer pays the penny every hour, and then it goes into the worker benefit fund and we draw from that. Matt might be able to answer that question. I cannot.
Yeah, I can just add, I don't have the dollar figure, but we can certainly pull that. And we do an annual WBF report to MLAC. Have we done that this year yet, or is that?
Usually in November.
Usually in November. And one of the, part of the report will be how much we paid for the different programs that are funded out of the WBF. So we'll have that in that report and we can.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to Chrissy's answer to your question, Margaret. There are certain touch points where the insurer is required to send out notifications related to the return to work programs to employers and workers. So there's that, and then the program does. Chrissy downplayed a lot the outreach efforts that they do. They go to all the OSHA conferences throughout the state to try to connect with employers, and then they also, when they're in those areas, do workshops for workers. So they'll send out notifications to preferred workers in the area, like in the Dalles, for example, and they'll get a room like this and get as many preferred workers as they can in the area to educate them on their benefits and sort of, it's a workshop truly in teaching them how how to market the benefits to an employer. You know, there's one thing you go up and say, hey, I was injured, you should hire me. There's this program. Or
Yeah, right.
if you hire me,
Right.
there's this program
Right.
that'll reimburse half my wages for 6 months. Are you interested? So they try to sort of teach them how to use the program and sell it, I guess, for a certain better term.
Bring
Frame it. There you go.
There you
Frame
go.
it. Yeah.
What kind of turnout do you have? Oh, sorry. At those, go ahead.
Yeah, Brian, I
I
guess.
apologize.
Sarah.
Are you sure? Okay. How's the turnout at those events when you have preferred workers come out and talk to those?
Pre-COVID, we had a lot.
Okay.
A lot.
Good.
I mean, we were really busy. Post-COVID, we're struggling hard to get people to show up. I don't know why. In this area alone, between Hood River and the Dalles, since 2000 anyway, there's, well over 200 people in this area. When we pull numbers and ask people to come, nobody comes. Bend used to be a huge market for us too, as was Medford. We just did one in Bend and I had 3 people. So I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
That's good to know.
Yes,
Sure.
yes, Sarah.
I think you answered that, Matt, when you, or Christy, both, when you say you can market, when the employee or the potential employee can market that, which is nice that they can actually say something on the employer side. Of course, we cannot ask. And then is this a benefit that current employers can take part in? Because you talk about as they're looking for a job, I'm just wrapping my brain around, like, we try to keep our employees. And so is that a potential there as well? Or does it have to be a new employer?
No, no, if you have injured workers that you bring back, then you would be eligible to use the program if they meet the program criteria. You can always recruit for preferred workers. You would be surprised how many people are out there, but they're going to be apprehensive to tell you that.
How do you recruit them?
Just say you hire preferred workers. And then after they're, I'm no attorney, obviously, but, then after they're hired, you could also, open that conversation up. Because you do have 90 days to get that premium exemption, activated. And so that's the real push, so.
Yeah, and I'll just add,
Sorry.
Chrissy briefly touched on it in her presentation, but the employer injury, if they have a worker who was injured and has permanent restriction and qualifies for the program, the employer injury has sort of one crack at all the benefits that Christy mentioned to bring that employee back. That doesn't touch the worker's benefits. So the worker would have those benefits for future use. So if it's my employee and I bring them back, I can do worksite modification. If it's a new job, we can do worksite creation. We can get the worker tools and clothing if they need it. We can do the wage subsidy. And then the employer still has, the worker still has all of their benefits intact for future use. If that employee later promoted to a new position within the company, they could then use their benefits. So there are ways that employers and workers can, work to help the employee in their career as well, using the benefits of the program.
And in 2020, just a little anecdotal, we had a catastrophic injury at Roseburg that ended up resulting in utilizing the program, and it was phenomenal. I mean, working with a
Wonderful.
vocation counselor through that process and making sure he got set up. I mean, it was really nice. So definitely utilize it.
Once employers know about it, they
Yeah.
they love it.
Yeah.
Because it's super easy to use. It's a win-win on both sides. And we just got to get employers educated. And like Matt said, we do a lot of outreach. I just kind of forget it's what I do all day.
And actually, that worker's been promoted 3 times since then. He's
Oh,
doing
that's
really well.
great.
And, yeah, so really cool program.
See, I love
Great-
that
great work.
testimony.
Yeah.
I love that. We need you to come talk.
Yeah, right. Anytime.
So I know we had a couple, I think Evo and Odalise. Evo, do you have some questions?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Ivo Trummer with the Safe Corporation. Christy, thank you for the presentation.
Oh, hi.
I just had a couple of questions following up on a couple of slides. You had a lifetime maximum on there, but I wasn't sure what the number was, if you could touch on that. And then the second is, I'm looking at all these dollar amounts, and those are great. How did they get set and adjusted over time, and when was the last time they got adjusted?
I'm trying to get those changed because we need to, and we will eventually raise those amounts.
And is that a rulemaking or? Is
Yes, it is. Yeah. So we're looking at it. It's on everybody's mind. It's just a matter of getting it done. So, so the numbers, I struggled with how to explain this, and I don't know why, but I struggle all the time. So you have a lifetime maximum. So again, we'll take clothing. Okay, so you have $1,000 maximum with a one-time use per job of $500. So, yes,
Thank you. So these numbers are the lifetime maximum already?
yes,
Thank you. There's not an umbrella number.
No.
Thank you, yeah.
I think so.
Oh,
Yeah, and then
is that it?
Odalise, I think Odalise was the other one.
Yes, hi everyone, Olayisa Yashinker, Oregon ASME. How long does a worker have to say I want to be part of this program? Is there like a specific timeline, or is it like forever, they're injured?
Yeah.
And they can go back to work whenever they want, and the employer can accept them if they're part of this program?
So if they haven't been found eligible for the program through either the notice of closure process or us determining their eligibility, they can call us at any time and we can pull their information as long as the insurance company has it. And we'll make sure, we'll do our due diligence to determine if they're eligible. If they have a card, once you're a preferred worker, you're a preferred worker for life. So you can offer the premium exemption piece, that benefit, for the lifetime to any employer as often as you want to. There is no cap. You can actually offer premium exemption. Let's say you work 2-3 jobs. You can offer that benefit to the 2 or 3 employers at one time. Because we want to make sure statutorily, the employer is covered if you hire a preferred worker. So we want to make sure that that's always the employer protected. We do have some time frames with our benefits. The premium exemption is 90 days. We have to know about that within the first 90 days of hire. And then all the other benefits, you have 3 years from your date of hire to let us know. But then after that, then the program, you can't use it with that same employer. But if you change jobs, you always just need to we always want the preferred worker to let us know if they change jobs, so we can vet out all those time frames for them.
And is that notice that gets mailed out, is that only in English, or is that mailed out in?
Currently, our card itself is only in English, but we do have Spanish that goes out as well. So if somebody calls and wants it in another language, we can do that. Our system currently doesn't flag whether or not you speak a different language.
What if you cross state lines? So let's say preferred worker here, we hire them as Roseburg, but we have to move them to North Carolina. Would they still have access to those Oregon benefits? Or because they're out of state, now they're on their own?
Yeah, Oregon only. Subject to employer, subject to worker.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions online? Not seeing it. Anybody else from?
Oh, you're good. You stay right here. You're doing a good job.
I'd love to talk with you.
Oh, perfect.
Employers
Yeah.
and workers.
Okay, I would love that. And also, my card is in the back,
Great.
along with the presentation and the back summary sheet.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So next up, I see Ombuds Office for Oregon Workers presentation with Barbara Anderson.
Good morning. I always hate following Christy. Oh, it's horrible. She does an awesome, this amazing program, and everybody asks all these questions, and then we come up here and it's crickets. It's a great program. I'm Barbara Anderson. I'm the Ombuds for Oregon Workers. I have been in this position since January 9th, 2023. I was trying to remember my dates there. But I've been with Workers' Comp for 25 years now. Okay, so we advocate for Oregon workers. There's my little clicker thingy here. Which one do I use?
Right here. Right there.
Okay. There we go. So we were created as part of legislative reform in 1987 to reduce litigation and cost to the workers' comp system. And then in 2021, the governor tasked us with also advocating for workers as it relates to OSHA, workplace safety and health. So we don't see a lot of that yet, but we do try to advocate for workers if they have filed complaints with OSHA and feel that they were not heard or they've been dismissed. We will try to do, I call it mediation, kind of mediate, talk with OSHA, kind of the same thing we do with insurance companies, and I'll get to that. But it's a little more limited with safety and health than it is with workers' comp, because we are workers' comp subject matter experts, not OSHA experts. So anyway, that happened in 2021. So our name went from Ombuds for Injured Workers, or Ombudsman for Injured Workers, to Ombuds Office for Oregon Workers. which means we get everybody calling us from BOLI and employment and anybody all over the place. Okay, so we, again, advocate for injured workers. We talk to them about their rights and their responsibilities. We talk to them about their time loss benefits, how it's calculated, what they may qualify for, medical benefits. We walk them through any litigation as far as, if they're, they don't agree with the closure, they don't agree with the denial, any of that. We walk them through how they can go through that process. And then, of course, like I said, safety and health complaints. If a worker feels like they are being dismissed or not treated fairly with OSHA when they file a complaint or concern, we'll help explain it to them, work with OSHA just to make sure there's an equal understanding there. And then, of course, fatality benefits. That's a big one. Luckily, we don't see those as often. But for the fatality benefits, we actually work closely with OSHA. They'll notify us of a fatality. They'll notify me of a fatality. And then I'll go in and do the research on the employer, the insurance company, and then make contact with the family to offer condolences, of course, and then talk to them about how to file a claim if they're interested and what that could look like for them, what they may qualify for, and just walk them through that process. A lot of times it's also working with the funeral directors to make sure that the burial and stuff gets taken care of and that workers don't have to deal with that, or the family doesn't have to deal with that. We try to work closely with the insurance company and the funeral directors. Okay, yeah, common issues. Daily, how do I file a claim? We will sit down and help somebody walk them through how to fill out the 801, although we do have that really cool 801 video now, how to fill out the 801. How do I file a claim? My family member passed away at work. What can I do? What are my benefits? When will I get them? How will I get them? The insurance company is not responding. That should be in bold and underlined and maybe repeated 12 times because that's a really big issue. I want a new doctor. Do I need a lawyer? We cannot offer legal advice. We're not attorneys. So we often tell people we always recommend getting an attorney because workers' comp is very complicated. But not everybody wants to get one. So my claim was denied. What can I do? Again, we'll walk them through the litigation process and explain that process for them. How can we help? The biggest thing is empathize. Usually these workers aren't real thrilled that they were injured. And by the time they get to us, a lot of times they're really frustrated and really upset because, again, insurance companies not responding, the adjusters being rude. They're at a time loss check. They've been off of work for 6 weeks and they haven't received one, or they received a $50 good faith payment to pay their bills. I'm not bitter, but and then of course, just listen. A lot of times workers will call us and there isn't really a big issue, but they really need to be heard. And so, especially when we get workers who are really volatile, those ones end up coming to me, and oftentimes it really is just kind of listening to them and agreeing and letting them know that their feelings are valid. And just whatever we can do. Sometimes it's a form of mediation where, well, I don't want to talk to the adjuster anymore. They're a total jerk. They're setting me up, whatever. I only want to talk to you. So then there's this, a go-between. So I'll call the insurance company and say, hey, what's going on? And get the full story and then work with the worker. And a lot of times the insurance companies are telling the worker what they need to be telling them, but the workers have a hard time either understanding it or trusting what the insurance company is saying. Because again, the world revolves around money for insurance companies is what the workers think. So again, we help fill out forms. And then when I say mediate, again, it's just working between the worker and the insurance company or the worker and OSHA, even just with, like worker advocacies or advocates, working with them and the division and OSHA, just whoever we can to support that and nurture that relationship. That's what we do for there. And then let's see, our statistics. So last year we had 7,300 total inquiries, and then that resulted in over 1,200 contacts, which just means, it was more than just a phone call. 86% of those were resolved within 2 days. And then 15% of those were non-English speakers, mostly Spanish. We don't see a lot of others, but we do have the capability of any different language. We reviewed 611 settlements totaling over 15 million with unrepresented workers. So that's one of the things I forgot to mention. We work closely with the board on these. So when the board receives a settlement from a worker who is not represented, the board will notify us. We'll get a list of those workers, and Jaylee, one of our ombuds, will contact those workers, every worker, and during the 30-day cooling off period. And she'll talk with them about that settlement, make sure that they understand what they're giving up and what this could look like for the future. Just to make sure they understand, because they don't have an attorney walking them through that. So yeah, she did 611 last year. She does those, we get them weekly. And that's a really great service. So we participate in these, the advisory meetings, MLAC, medical advisory, a lot of the OSHA rule meetings now, and then of course the governor's agriculture, labor, housing task force. I participate in that as well. So if you need to contact us, there's our information. Oh, does anybody have any? Oh, you do have a question. That's so nice. Is this a pity question?
No, it's not. You mentioned, and it's a bullet point, the insurer is not responding. I struggle with that because I can't imagine as an employer, I can speak specifically to us as an employer, we respond, our insurance carrier responds, and I can't imagine anyone being a jerk. So I just want to kind of push back a little bit on that. With over a majority are using SAFE, which we are.
No, well, I have to be careful about the things that I say, but it's not, they're not one of our frequent offenders. So there are many other insurance companies and adjusters in the.
Right. I just want to flag that.
Yeah.
Because over half of us use SAFE.
Yeah.
And we personally don't have an issue.
Yeah. No, I agree. We don't, that's not necessarily where the issue is. There's some others that are frequent offenders and that we try to work closely with on correcting that. And then of course, I think it was last year, we worked with WCD on issuing the industry notice, reminding insurance companies that by rule, they need to be responding within a certain amount of time. Otherwise they could be penalized. So it's a lot. There's a lot of that. And I'm sure some of it is staffing issues. And some of it is they're dealing with difficult workers and they may just, oh my gosh, I have to call this worker back. I don't know what all the reasons are, but it's really difficult when you've got a worker who, again, this is their lifeline. This is how they pay their bills or not pay their bills.
And I can kind of speak to that too, because that impacted my, when I filed my claim. And again, employer was actually a dream to work with, had no problems, was totally happy to approve light duty. There was ample light duty to be done and all of that. But when I was enrolled in an MCO, there was a hiccup in terms of the provider that I was receiving care from was not within that MCO, but was within another. So I was not able to actually see the provider. And so the response was, oh, okay, well, we're going to put you back on no duty and here's muscle relaxers and Vicodin. I think the next appointment's in 4 weeks. And that was it. That was the response. And I said, okay, well, the paperwork that I had received in working with the claims adjuster, I'd received a mailing from the insurer that had a list of all my rights and buried like 7 pages in. It had, you have a right to contest the enrollment in MCO and request another one. But the adjuster that I was speaking with on the phone, when they would answer the phone, said, no, you can't do that. We've enrolled you in the MCO. You have to go with that. I said, okay, well, I have a letter from you on your letterhead saying I have an absolute right within this period to do that. And as we approached the end of the period and they were refusing to answer my calls, I actually called at the time Ombuds for Injured Workers and said, hey, this is going to be a problem. I'm going to have to get an attorney. And things are going to go thermonuclear if this is it, And so the wonderful, helpful person was able to take down my information. And again, this wasn't an issue at all with the employer. They were replying. It was just the insurer. And I don't even think it was an intentional issue on the part of the insurer. It was just a lapse in terms of their training of the adjuster, because when the adjuster finally did call me back, they said, no, I'm wrong. I was wrong about that. Let's get this fixed. We'll get it done. That was after the Ombuds office intervened and did all of that. So I think that, again, is one of those issues that it's critically important that we have that, because that puts us back on track to just having the worker get better, right? Which is better for everybody. But I know it's frustrating for employers as well, that, you participate fully, you want to comply with all of this, you're getting bombarded with paperwork from the insurer and other folks, and you're participating in all of that, but there's still hangups a lot of times for the worker. So I think that, again, I think that's a one-off, that's an anecdote, that was a really weird situation, but it's enough, it vividly sticks with me. I was at 2016, 2017, so that's,
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it also is just working with insurance company adjusters who are newer or from a different state and who struggle with some of the rules and statutes, walking them through how to calculate, the fatal benefits or the PTD benefits, or they didn't know that they had to pay this burial, or or union call, hiring halls. They don't know how to calculate the time loss for that. There's a lot of stuff that we just walk them through, and they're not intentionally not handling things the way they need to be doing. I think a lot of it is just lack of education.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was a claims adjuster for 7 years. I was immersed in all of that. And I will say, all these examples, they're very anecdotal, to your point. Every situation is different. Every claim is a unique situation. Every relationship between the claimant or the worker and the adjuster and the employer, all very unique in itself. And I know adjusters are very overworked. They have caseloads of 120 or more. They typically have a diary that they try to follow. So if somebody calls, you add them in queue and you try to work your way to them. That being said, there's different workers out there, right? And there's different people who are going to handle their case log different or handle a conversation with an injured worker differently. I will say from my experience, whenever I saw a ombudsman on my caller ID, it was a relief. You know what I mean? If somebody had an issue, they found a resource that they could go, and they're reaching out to me to try to resolve that. That's always
It's a good working relationship with the insurance companies. It's not there's no intention of being volatile or anything like that. It really is just sometimes just reiterating what the insurance company has said to this worker, because they just couldn't hear it correctly because of their state of mind or because of where they were receiving it, or again just answering questions for them. But we have really good working relationships with the industry, with insurance companies, and of course with the divisions. So. Anybody else?
Other questions, audience, online? Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So next up, I see small ombuds office presentation, Caitlin Breitbach.
It is a small one.
I am very small. Co-Chair Strickland, Co-Chair Priest, thank you for having me. Members of the MLAC, for the record, my name is Caitlin Breitbach. Very good job pronouncing my name. We are the small business ombudsman for workers' compensation. So there are other ombudsman's offices within the state that specializes in small businesses. We are specifically for workers' compensation. So I need to start putting that on the card because we get a lot of calls about other types of small business issues. So I'm going to kind of just tell you guys all about what we do and how we can help small businesses throughout the state of Oregon, what we are currently doing, and then what our goals are for the next few years. I'm not going to go into the Mahoney Hall reform again because I think we've heard it like 3 or 4 times now, but that's where this position came out of. It's we want a fair and equitable workers' compensation system, and this was one of the positions that came out of that to kind of help towards that goal. We are called the Small Business Ombudsman's Office. However, when somebody calls me, I don't ask them, hey, do you have more than 50 employees? And then when they say yes, I hang up. We will help. We will help businesses of all sizes. Currently, we're working with a very large manufacturer up in Portland to kind of deal with an ongoing issue with an audit. Again, we're not going to just say, oh, you have lawyers for that. You don't need us, or you have people who handle that for you. You can't use our resources. We don't do that. Our doors are always open for anybody and everybody who calls. Again, we're here for Oregonians, so we don't shut you out. Similar to Barb's team, we are independent and confidential. So one of the reasons that our position is not held in the Workers' Compensation Division, and we're actually under the Director's Office, is so that we can remain 100% independent and confidential. We don't want an employer calling us saying, hey, I haven't had workers' comp for 10 years, and then me hanging up and calling our employer compliance unit and being like, you guys need to get these people in trouble. The goal is compliance, right? So they call us, we give them advice, we say, hey, you should have had workers' comp for the last 10 years. Let's figure out what we can do to fix that. And then also explain to them what the risks are associated to not having it, or not following the rules that they're supposed to, and really communicating with them why it's in their best interest to maybe heed warning. Like I kind of alluded to at the beginning, we are obviously workers' compensation. However, we get a lot of phone calls for other issues with small businesses throughout the state. I want to register my business. How do I do that? I want to hire my first employee. How do we do taxes? Oh, I owe money to the IRS. How do I handle that? All of that. So we try really, really hard to establish connections with other state agencies. And other, not necessarily even advocates or ombudsmen, but any other state resource that we know a small business might need to have conversations with. So we work very closely with BOLI, employment, our counterparts over at Secretary of State. They also have a small business ombudsman's office. I think they are actually the Secretary of State's Small Business Assistance Team, I think is their full name. And they do pretty much the same thing we do, but with all other state agencies. So we work very closely with them. And we try really, really hard to do soft handoffs rather than just say, that's not our issue, call BOLI, hang up. So a lot of the times when people end up in our, to the point where they have to call us, they might have already called 5, 6, 7 other agencies and have no idea who to talk to, where to go. And so our goal is to make sure that we're not just handing them off to one other state agency. So we are going to call that other state agency. We're going to call our contacts over at those state agencies and say, hey, Joe Smith called me. He's really frustrated. He has this question. Can you help them? And then I will have them call them so that they're not, sitting on hold for another 30 minutes waiting for help, or they don't get, or if I call them and go, hey, Trevor, he's the small business ombudsman over at Secretary of State, and he goes, that's not really our issue. So I didn't send them there on a fool's errand, right? So I try really hard to make sure that we are sending people to the right location, but then also giving that soft handoff so they don't feel like we're just sending them off on their way. I don't have statistics on it, but I would say I probably get 3 to 4 phone calls a day that have nothing to do with workers' comp-ish. So I'm going to kind of go through our just commonly asked questions and some examples of how we deal with these questions and how we help. So most common question, do I need to buy workers' compensation? Usually when people call me, it's probably yes. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be yes. Maybe they hired their nephew and they're like, well, he's family. We don't need to cover him. And we're like, no, they still need to be covered. And so we walk them through why. We'll walk them through the statute that talks about subjectivity and where they can kind of find their answers to their questions. A very common question is like, I hired a nanny. Well, home workers are not subject. So we'll here's the statute that says that. You can walk through this, and we give them the resources in order to kind of prove to them, so they're not just like, oh, another state worker just told me I didn't need to do anything, and then 3 months later they get a bill as a non-compliant employer, right? So we try really hard to back that information up with our statutes and rules when we discuss that. If they do need to buy workers' compensation, we'll walk them through how to buy workers' compensation, where to buy workers' compensation. There are, to your point, state is like the largest workers' comp provider in the state. However, there are 300 insurers that are doing business within the state of Oregon. And SAFE might not be the best fit for them, maybe, or maybe SAFE has decided that they don't want to cover them. And so our job really is to find them the where they can get coverage, walk them through their options. Usually we'll most of the time they're going to probably need an agent of some kind. So we will give them a list of agents in their area. We try to do it by region so that if there are agents close by, it's just usually a little easier. Sometimes there are going to be insurance companies that specialize specifically in different types of businesses. So maybe some are going to be better with construction, maybe some are going to be better with agriculture, things like that. So we do try and kind of make the best fit. But most of the time we're going to give them a list and say, here are your options in their area. Please pick whichever one fits best for you. Then the next two things kind of go hand in hand. So can you help with a dispute with my insurer? And then how do I appeal my workers' compensation premium audit? So most of the time when people call me, it's because they've experienced an audit and they don't agree with it, right? So maybe their classification code was incorrect. Maybe they felt an independent contractor that was brought into the audit should not have been brought into the audit. And they'll call me usually pretty angry. And we'll talk them down, but then also walk through why it was done the way that it was. And then if we do feel like there was an issue, we are kind of act as like a middleman between the employer and the insurer. So premium audit disputes and hearings can be time consuming and expensive. And so we obviously want employers to keep that right. So we'll suggest filing a premium audit dispute, but on the back end, we'll work with the insurers to maybe fix it outside of that process. To save, again, time, money, energy, especially with small businesses. They don't always have time to go sit, and argue their case, or the resources to try to figure that out. Maybe they don't feel comfortable doing it themselves, so they need to hire an attorney. Attorneys are very expensive, all of that. I'll use an example of my most recent case. We had a small construction company call us and say, hey, we're not necessarily disagreeing, but we had this circumstance. They changed payroll companies right in the middle of a policy year, and they were missing about 3 months of paperwork, of payroll. And they weren't trying to say that the insurer did anything wrong, because it was just a mistake of a lack of information. And so we worked with the insurer, and we just pretty much just said, hey, would you be willing to kind of do a second audit? Can we do it again? And we're like, well, they already filed the dispute, but we would really like to, solve the outside of this. They're willing to work with you. And they're like, definitely. So the insurer went out, did a secondary audit in the field. So they were able to walk through everything, look at everything. They were actually able to get that information that was lost. And it resulted in a $20,000 premium savings. So, and then they can, and then DFR can check off and not do the hearing. It kind of saves work for everybody. So that's usually our goal. However, if we're unsuccessful, again, we try to still reserve those rights. And so we will walk them through that process and get them in touch with Gail Gage at DFR, and kind of tell them what they need to do. And then Gail kind of takes over at that point. I don't have any statistics on this, but most of the time people want to take care of it outside of that process if they can. Another thing that they can do is come to OREC, which is kind of like MLAC a little bit, but it's the Oregon Review Advisory Committee, and it is for the insurers, employers. They come and we discuss rate making and classification code disputes and different things. I do currently chair that committee, and anybody who has a dispute about an audit can come and present their case. And they vote on whether or not it is, if they actually have a case, whether they agree. And then they still have that right to go up to the next level if ORAC disagrees. But that's just another mechanism to kind of try and keep it out of that very expensive and time-consuming process. Who here, and I don't know if there's any business owners back here, but has anybody had to do a test audit before? No? No? Okay, well, good. Glad. So test audits, if you are a business owner, you might never ever see one. They're randomized. I get calls where they're like, oh, I've been doing business for 15 years and I've never seen this. And I was like, yeah, you'll probably never see one again. But pretty much it's where NCCI, does the whole committee know who NCCI is? Okay. No, so National Council on Compensation Insurance. So they are the ones that we work with for the basic manual, for classification codes, rates, all that stuff. And they also help with our test audit program, which is where I don't know how they pick it. It's randomized. I'm not sure exactly how they pick, but they'll go through and they'll pick different audits or different companies, and then NCCI will pretty much redo an audit, and they make sure that the insurer audited to the correct standards. And that's just to make sure that they're all following rules, they're all keeping up, and it protects both the insurer and the employer. But we get lots of calls of, well, this random letter came in the mail. I have no idea who NCCI is. What is this? But our number and our name is listed on the bottom of that letter so that they can call us and ask us about the process. So we probably, I'd say about 4 or 5 calls a week on test audits. And the first words out of their mouth is this legitimate? Almost every time. Like, yes, they're not trying to steal your data, your payroll. Don't worry. So I'd say other than audit disputes, the next biggest thing that we really deal with are going to be our non-complying employer penalties. So, contrary to popular belief, most non-complying employers didn't mean to be a non-compliant employer. They didn't do it maliciously. They didn't do it on purpose. 9 times out of 10, it's ignorance. Maybe they thought they didn't need coverage. Maybe they thought somebody was an independent contractor when in reality they really didn't fit that definition, and now they have a penalty and a claim that they have to pay out of pocket. So they will call us and we will work with them and our employer compliance unit. We work collaboratively with them to make sure that the employers are being taken care of, and walked through the process. And sometimes we can help either do the reduction, or maybe there was a reason why they didn't ask for a reduction within the time period that they were supposed to. Things happen, lives are busy. We just did one recently where the employer had been out of the country during the period that he could appeal, during the period where he could ask for a reduction. So he never got any of that mail, never, was informed. And things happen, so we want to try, the whole goal is compliance, right? Not necessarily penalizing. So we want to make sure that they have coverage and are following all the rules and have the appropriate education and knowledge that they need to move forward. Speaking of moving forward, so I just have a couple updates for you. We did recently hire a new assistant, Julie Stratton, which she will probably come to MLAC meetings moving forward. And then retirement. So I'm sure people here, most everybody know who Dave Walkie is. He's still technically working. He is very slowly sliding off into retirement. He is officially retired, but he is back as a temp. It took a little while to hire, so he stayed on to help, and then also he is helping train. And he is a wealth of knowledge, so he will be very missed. And I'm going to make him go to lunch with me once a month, even in his retirement. Also, I know that in the last MLAC meeting, it was requested that we do a version of the 801 video that the Ombuds for Oregon Workers. I still can't get used to it. did a few months ago. That is in progress. We have a script written and all of that ready to go. It just needs to be, we were working with communications to get it recorded and edited. We are going to add a little bit more to that 801. I know that in past meetings, there has been some issues or some concern with retaliation when it comes to employers not allowing workers to file a claim, or once the employer or the worker does file a claim, then the employer retaliates. We thought maybe this would be a good idea and a good time to maybe put that out there and explain the responsibilities of an employer to make sure that they are not doing that, and walk them through. So it'll be, because the worker portion of 801 is a little bit longer, so we wanted to make the video, ours would be like 30 seconds of here's what you fill out. And so we wanted to add a little bit more to make sure that there was something out there for employers to be able to kind of have a visual representation of what their responsibilities were.
Maybe information on the preferred worker program.
Yes. Oh yeah, I was gonna add to that. So I don't have a little section on my commonly asked questions, but a lot of times people will call me and go, how do I save money on my workers' compensation? Which you can't, I mean, the rates are the rates, right? So as long as your experience modifier is good and all that stuff, one of the ways that you can save money is to utilize that program. And I think that a lot of people don't realize that with premium exemption, 3 years of not paying premiums on even one employee can save a lot of money. And not to mention, if they have a claim within those 3 years that the worker is re-injured, then they're not responsible for those claims costs, which doesn't affect their experience modifier, which then also makes their workers' comp rates go down. So thank you for reminding me of that. So we also peddle the program when we're out doing our own outreach. We bring preferred worker program information with us as well. Especially since we're more employer focused, we go to a lot of outreach that is very employer focused. And so we're giving out all of that material as well. I used to work for the program, and I am very passionate about how they help Oregonians in general. So we work very closely with them. Going forward, so COVID kind of derailed a lot of our outreach, obviously. So in the next 2 years, our big goal is to do as much outreach as we possibly can. We've already we went to 4 different outreach events last week, and I have 2 this week and then 1 next week. So, we're really trying to amp up those outreach events. We're also creating some publications to help both employers. And I'm sure they'll probably be helpful for workers as well, but we're going to try and create more like one-pagers, things that we can give out to the community, things like that. And really we're trying to get into the community and continue to grow relationships. And if anybody knows of anything that you want us to attend, please let us know. And we're always welcome to come and do either speaking engagements or just boothing, whatever the case may be. So we welcome all of that extra information. And that's me and my new assistant. So again, Julie was just hired 2 months ago, and that I just realized how bad the height discrepancy is. She's much taller than me, and we're both wearing heels, which seems unfair. So anyway, this is my contact information. If anybody has any questions here, I would be happy to answer, but you can always call me. My information is in the back. I also have a little like accordion fold out trifold card that has our information along with a lot of other small business resources, CCB, GOLI, employments, all of that.
I have one question. It's about the assigned risk program.
Mm-hmm.
So if employers don't qualify for preferred rates,
yeah,
how does that work, and how do you work with the assigned risk?
Yeah, so the assigned risk pool is also NCCI, so they administer that. They go into 3 insurance companies: Safe, Liberty, and Travelers are the 3 that are currently in the assigned risk pool. A lot of the times, if it's a new employer, somebody who has no history and it's also like a high risk the likelihood of them ending up in the assigned risk pool is pretty high. But we always suggest, one, that they get an independent agent that can go out and go out to market and pretty much get the best rates that they can. Sometimes they can get them in the voluntary market, sometimes they just can't. But we will walk through how to get out eventually. So we talk to them about safety programs. We'll tell, like, hey, you might want to have OSHA come out and do, I'm sorry, what are they called then? Consultations, thank you. Where they'll come out and, look at the environment, make sure everybody's safe. If they have, a safety team, that can keep their experience mod low, their claims low, using the preferred worker program, using the employer injury program, keeping their claims costs low or non-existent. We can keep no claims from happening. And we'll walk them through how, if they have a good agent, I shouldn't have to tell them this, but we'll walk them through, like, every policy period, you shouldn't be reapplying into the voluntary market to try and get out. Some of the higher risk areas, it's going to take a while. Roofing, logging, Dave Walkie always used helicopter logger as his example of, like, a high risk job. So it can sometimes take time, but it's a conversation that we always have with our employers that give us a call.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? See a question?
Here, I'll turn it on.
No, sorry.
Oh.
Oh, that was a.
That was a no, thank you. Okay. All righty. Well, again, if anybody has any outreach events they think we should go to, please let me know. We're trying to find all of them. So,
Great.
all right, thank you for having me.
Thank you. So next up, I see Oregon Institute of Occupational Health Sciences, OHSU, looks like Associate Professor Dr. Matthew Butler and Stephen Shea, also Professor and Institute Director.
Thank you, everybody, for allowing us to present to you today and using your valuable time. My name is Stephen Shea, Professor and Director of the Oregon Institute of Occupational Health Sciences. And this is Matthew Butler, who's a faculty member at our institute as well. I'll present first, and Matt will present after me about some of his research. My presentation is simply just to introduce probably some of the new members of MLAC and give broad strokes about our overview of our institute activities. And Matt is going to give one just excellent example of the type of research we do. So the institute, on here, there's a couple of hyperlinks. I don't want to go to them now, but we have a new website design. I don't know if you get the electronic version of this presentation, or is it does it get handed out?
It's going to be on the MLAC website
Okay.
after the meeting, yeah.
So you can hit the website hyperlink there and the annual report, which is, if you do that, it'll take you elsewhere, so don't bother now. But it's happening. So there's our new website, and well, go ahead and click the annual report, which you go back to the hyperlink on the slide. The second one, there you go. Oh, you have to be in presentation mode. Just go to presentation mode. Who's operating this?
That's why everything's working.
We have an AI assistant.
So this annual report is basically, I'm going to review a lot of the material in that. If you just click on the one page there, it'll take you through some of the. We're proud of this, but I want you to stop it there, because otherwise I want you to give my talk.
And I believe there's a stack of these in the back as
Right.
well for folks that are present.
Yeah, because I'm not going to be able to touch all of those points today. Perhaps you could go back to the presentation. Second slide.
You just press the right arrow key.
Okay, so the Oregon Institute of Occupational Health Sciences, just like a lot of the things that you heard about today, started in around about 1988, 89, around the time of the Hall discussions. And at the time, it was called the Center for Research on Occupational and Environmental Toxicology. housed at OHSU. We changed its name to reflect actually a little bit more of what we do about a decade ago. And what we do is we promote well-being and prevent disease and disability among workers. That sounds very grand. We have numerous approaches, and it's quite a unique institute because of that. We have basic science on mechanisms. We have clinical science with people in labs at OHSU who stay there for up to a couple of weeks sometimes, and applied research where we do research on interventions in the workplace. And those all talk to each other, and then we, based on those findings, we develop evidence-based tools, trainings, and educational programs to improve worker health and prevent disease and disabilities. We have 14 faculty members, and each of them, those faculty members, has a research team. And the research that they do overall is broadly in 4 themes. And one theme is environmental exposure. For instance, how does exposure to sun, heat, or smoke and other pollutants impact workers? Another area of expertise. We have a lot of people working on sleep and circadian health. How does a healthy sleep, diet, and exercise combat the negative impacts of night shift work and sedentary work? And how does poor sleep, diet, and inactivity contribute to diseases such as heart disease and obesity? Our areas of focus. Another is safety at work, how to create safe work sites, minimizing injury and fatality at work, and those can be interventions in the workplace or with the workers themselves. And we also have supportive workplace practices, which is designing and testing supportive interventions, including work schedule, work-family balance, supervisor check-ins, and mental health supports. Those are, it's very broad, and for a small faculty group, this can also shift over periods of time, and has shifted from, as we mentioned earlier, we were the Center for Research on Occupational and Environmental Toxicology. We're doing much more work now in the applied work in the workforce. One example of that is the Oregon Healthy Workforce Center, which is housed within our institute. The Oregon Healthy Workforce Center is mostly funded from the federal NIOSH center. There, for instance, we get 7.4 million over a 5-year period from NIOSH to help with this work. And this work uses a total worker health approach. It's taken the worker as a whole entity in terms of their life, their home life and their work life, and recognizing that they speak to each other, and that trying to keep workers safe and healthy is the overall goal, and improving well-being with interventions that are tested in groups of workers and then translated into trainings that can be broadly available. So that's the total worker health. We are one of 10 centers nationally, centers of excellence across the states. Another large program that we're involved in is a collaboration with Oregon Health Authority. It's called the Occupational Public Health Program. It involves a surveillance that tracks workplace injuries, illnesses, hazards, deaths, and exposures annually, and it provides information on where and how and why workers get sick and hurt on the job. So this helps identify problems, and also we work towards solutions of those problems. And again, this is just very broad strokes. You can go into more depth on the website, or you can get in touch with us later on if you need more information.
I have one question on.
Yes?
I know we've heard NIOSH is working on the relationship of firefighting and cancers.
Yes.
But we've been having a hard time finding any data related to it. Is that something that you all are working on?
Not specifically. I know in the past, maybe 15 years ago, I know that our institute produced a report on that. And I know that MLAC sometimes discusses this. We do have some work with firefighters. Mostly currently we're looking at the effects of shift schedule changes in firefighters on their health and safety of the workers. But we don't have any current work in that area on cancer in firefighters specifically. We do have work on cancer, mostly skin cancer and exposure to UV light, looking at the basic mechanisms, and also we have that people in our faculty in our institute are developing remedies to avoid and ameliorate the melanoma based on DNA repair mechanisms just by putting on a cream. And we have presented to MLAC on that aspect of work as well. But no, we don't have firefighter cancer research currently.
Real quick, curious how often you update the surveillance program and the mapping and all that. How often is that reviewed?
I think it's annually in concert with Oregon Health Authority.
Yeah. It's really cool information. Love that I do.
Yeah.
Can I do a quick follow-up on Scott's question, or sorry, Patrick's question? Is you're not doing that kind of research, is that because of funding or because of some overarching purpose or policy or?
Yeah, you're getting to determine the question of what determines what we do. And I showed you sort of 4 research themes. It would certainly fall into one of those themes. How does exposure to pollutants and smoke?
Carcinogens.
Yes, does it? But we only have 14 faculty, and those faculty are partly funded by the Workers' Benefit Fund, as the Oregon Preferred Worker Program is, as mentioned by Christy Johnson and Matt West earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But mostly we get funding from grants from the federal government. So that sort of seed money from the state, the Workers' Benefit Fund, leads to additional funding from the state, from the federal grants and things like that. Those are highly competitive. And the faculty members develop a research program that they become internationally renowned for. You have to have that in order to get funding, and every one of our faculty has that federal funding. And you can't just drop things and go after these others. So it depends on recruitment. And we haven't recruited anyone in that area recently. So we have general expertise in toxicology and etc. And we have an outreach team that can delve into some of these issues, but to do research on it, which is we are mostly a research institute, we would have to recruit a faculty member to do that.
Thank you.
Pleasure. On the applied side of things, once we've done those sort of research interventions, then we try and translate that into programs that may be and trainings that are available on a website. And this is a website called Supported Workplaces Online Training. There's training in improving sleep and safety and mental health. And again, there's a hyperlink in the bottom right-hand corner of the materials that you could download from the web to go to this website to look at all of the individual trainings and download them. I'm just going to talk about one of them today, and that's on mental health support. And I believe this was presented in an initial form last year, and it's really taken off across Oregon, actually beyond Oregon. And this is designed by Jen Dimoff, who's an associate faculty member, and mostly Leslie Hammer, who's our associate director of applied sciences. And it's been taken up by all of these 17 entities shown on the left, across many of them from Oregon, but also even at Harvard University there, Hoffman Construction, et cetera, et cetera. And this intervention it improves worker well-being based on mental health metrics. So that's, I think, a success story for us, and it's growing quite nicely. Moving on, we have a new outreach team. Erin Flynn is behind me in attendance today. I hope that some of you may be able to bump into and chat with her after the meeting today. She's built a new team and has lots of lovely new newsletters and pods and blogs, etc. And we encourage you to like, follow, subscribe, etc. To those. Another program that we work with Oregon OSHA and Safe Corporation is called the Oregon Total Worker Health Alliance. We put on numerous courses on total worker health. Over 1,500 Oregon-based occupational safety and health professionals have done some of these courses over the last 5 years. And the courses range from just basics 101 through to train the trainer modules on total worker health. So that's some of the education in total worker health. We put on numerous symposia. Typically, we've done day-long symposia. Hopefully, some of you have attended them. We're actually moving now towards shorter and web-based symposium. Actually, there's one next week. So there's a QR code that you can link to register for this free virtual webinar on how to protect workers from extreme heat and poor health quality. So that's next Tuesday at noon. So feel free to attend that. In terms of our finances, as I mentioned, we receive some money from the Workers' Benefit Fund. It's shown here. About 31% of our income comes from there, and almost that seed money is multiplied by at least 2 to bring in federal funds from grants, and that's the seed money also helps with recruitment of new faculty and all of the new types of endeavors we do. It's very, very important to us that seed money. It pays for the outreach, it pays for the training developments that we do. It supports a little bit of the Oregon Healthy Workforce Center. It pays for half of our faculty salaries. The other half is from federal grants, and all of the initiatives and that we embark upon. And beyond the grants that it brings in, there's a multiplier effect upon, for Oregon based on all of the number of employees we bring in. So I said that we have 14 faculty, each of them has their own team. For instance, the 8 faculty members that we've brought in since I've been here over the last 5 years, they brought in $22 million of federal funds alone for the research that they do. Those funds are hard to get, and you have to be basically a world expert in your area to compete with all of the people doing similar research or other competitive research that compete for those funds. And one example of that, this I think is my last slide, is Matthew Butler. Matt Butler came to us with a wonderful pedigree from doing his bachelor's degree at Berkeley, and then his PhD at Princeton, and then a postdoctoral fellowship at Columbia, and then a postdoctoral fellowship at Harvard University, and then came to OHSU as a faculty member. And he is a great example of the type of thing we do, because his research has spanned basic research in animal models through clinical research in the lab, and some intervention work, and then also epidemiology, which is sort of even broader than I presented earlier. So now I'm going to pass over to Matt Butler to talk about just one of his projects that has relevance to worker health. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you. I'm Matthew Butler, as he said. My goal today is really just to give you sort of a snapshot of the type of research that we do in the Institute, and specifically in my laboratory. And I'm going to be talking today about shift work and the effective eating times, because shift workers obviously have changed schedules, and one of the most salient features for them is the fact that they have now changed when they're eating. And even though I'm focused here on shift work, I'll just mention that late night eating is shown to be a risk factor for a whole host of different diseases, and it's not specific to shift workers, just shift workers have an exaggerated example of this. So in my laboratory, we focus on reproductive consequences of shift work, and primarily we study it in animal models so that we can really understand the mechanisms that are involved. Shift work has been associated with a host of different conditions, including irregular menstrual cycles, preterm birth, infertility, low birth weight, et cetera. And this is important to understand because especially within the population of people that are of the age that they're transitioning to parenthood, we have a high prevalence of shift work. These are exactly the people that are most likely to be doing shift work.
Can you define shift work?
Shift work is just anytime, we sort of say anytime you're not on a standard daytime shift. So it can be rotating shift work, it can be night work, it can be swing shifts, et cetera.
Swing shift graveyard predominantly, I assume is what you're
Yes,
referring to.
yeah.
Okay.
But one of the things that's interesting in the literature is that, when you look at all the big surveys of workers, oftentimes they're not asking health questions. And if they're asking health questions, they're not necessarily asking about your shift schedule at work. And so it's a little bit difficult to put these together. And we usually just bag everything into non-standard shift for the purposes of the research. Overall, infertility across the world and in the US is also going up. It's up to about 24% for first births. And within night shift workers in particular, we see a 40% increased need for fertility treatments. And then also during pregnancy, there's also risk factors associated with shift work. One of those is gestational diabetes. This is the diabetes that can develop during pregnancy that most often resolves after pregnancy, but doesn't always. And again, what I'll focus on here is the fact that these shift workers are changing when they eat. And the reason why we're interested in the timing of eating is that, first of all, the time of food can be as important as what you eat in terms of the metabolic effects of it. It's also something that might be more easily modifiable. So having people diet, as we all know, is very hard. Nobody sticks with it, and the effects are sort of short-lived after you finish dieting. New evidence for just changing the timing of eating alone seems to have potentially a much longer lasting effect. As I mentioned, in my laboratory, we're primarily interested in animal models. So we'll look at all these different behaviors and physiologies from before pairing the animals to once they've given birth. And this is some of the first data that we got. We simply were feeding animals during their rest phase or in their active phase. So kind of a model of night eating in animals. And what you can see is that the animals that are fed during their active phase, this is just the cumulative percentage giving birth. So we pair them here. Mice have a gestation time of 3 weeks, so they start having litters. And then over the course of the next 3 months, all of the animals that are fed in their active phase end up giving birth. The ones that are fed in their rest phase, so this kind of model of night eating, first of all, they're slower to first birth, and then they also plateau at only 75% fertility compared to the 100%. So we were quite interested in this, and this led to a series of studies. And I'll just show one little piece of it to try and understand where this infertility is coming from. Historically, the study of circadian timing, or our internal biological timekeeping system, and reproduction, this fly is they've been intertwined for decades. And part of that is because there's this really strong timing structure in terms of reproduction. So this is an example of the hormonal trigger that causes ovulation. And in a mouse, this luteinizing hormone surge occurs on the day of estrus, and this is the actual hormone signal that causes ovulation. And it happens at a predictable time over the course of the light-dark cycle. So we simply asked whether or not the animals that were fed during the light phase, the ones that were infertile, had a normal LH surge to cause ovulation. So this is a 24-hour clock going from the top to the bottom. So noon's up here, lights turn off here, and this is when we expect the LH surge to occur. If we look at the animals that were our control animals, they all happen at about the right time. If we look at our animals that are fed during their active phase, they're exactly where you'd expect them to be. And then when they were fed in the rest phase, it turned out that this normally tightly timed signal is just happening kind of at random. And so
define rest phase versus the timing of those two phases.
So what we're talking about for the active phase would be our daytime and the mouse's nighttime,
So
because they're
daytime
nocturnal.
okay.
Yeah, so, and
Like 6 to 6? Can
for.
you help me?
Yeah,
when I
so for-
cheat? Very personal.
Yeah. So the evidence right now is that the earlier eating is better. So 6 to 6, 8 to 8. Calories consumed after 8 p.m. So the greater proportion of calories after 8 p.m. it ends up being associated with obesity and diabetes risk.
6 to 6.
6 to 6 is great. 8 to 8 is great. Separately, there may be a really important component for how long you're fasting as well. And so the time-restricted eating protocols that are starting to gain popularity tend to say, oh, let's try and restrict the total time that you're eating during the day to about 8 hours. So select, 10 to 6 or 8 to 5, something like that.
You can buy into that.
For sure. Okay, so one of the things that we like to do, though, is we don't like to restrict our research to just the animals. I'm currently trying to figure out ways of understanding timing of eating and fertility, but given the fact that the eating time is so associated with metabolic dysfunction, obesity, and diabetes, we decided to first look at this population of people that have gestational diabetes. Again, that diabetes that occurs during pregnancy. So this was a collaboration with Amy Valent, who's an OBGYN doc at OHSU, and she had a population of 74 women who had gone through pregnancy with continuous glucose monitors. She also had information on when they ate. And so we went back and did a retrospective analysis. And our preliminary data so far show that the people, again, who ate earlier, we just split them right down the middle. So the people with the earlier breakfasts had better glucose throughout the day, much lower glucose during the night, and overall may be sort of people that are at less risk for developing further complications. It may also be good for the baby because one of the problems with gestational diabetes is that high glucose is not just affecting mom, it's also affecting the baby. And so we're very interested in sort of pursuing this, and we're trying to write a clinical trial to really get at this and understand whether it could change, care for women that come in who are at risk for gestational diabetes.
Preliminary results agree with my grandma that breakfast is an important thing.
Yes, exactly. Right? There's the, breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, supper like a pauper, as sort of the old adage for how you should be eating. Yeah. So just to summarize, shift workers experience a whole host of health challenges, including reproduction. Our lab is focused primarily in the animals on the mechanisms behind this, but those mechanisms then can help us design potential health interventions that we can test, and sometimes they will work out, sometimes they won't. That's why we do the research. And last, as Steve mentioned, a lot of those early experiments that I showed the data for were actually funded by our internal pilot projects. So I was the recipient of one of those. I've also been on the reviewing side because our goal within the Institute is to use that seed money, but we have like a within Institute competitive process where we'll actually send out the proposals to external people for review to ensure that we're doing the best science, even at the pilot project stage. And then happily for my own sake, this led to a grant from NIH that's funding the lab for the next 5 years. And with that, thank you for your attention. Yes.
Dr. I'm a little bit worried about how I'm going to ask this question, and so I'm going to ask for your indulgence here. But when you, I'm assuming that at some point, this portion of your really fascinating research will come to a completion.
Yeah.
And what I'm interested in is what happens to it when it's done?
So that's a great question.
I mean, it sounds kind of rude, but what happens with this now?
So I would say that the research enterprise is part by design. So for example, these data that we have in the women is leading to some very specific grant proposals that we can write about gestational diabetes. From there, we're also very interested in the people who are at risk of developing gestational diabetes, right? So we can move backwards in the process to sort of understand things that way. We can also move forward to understand and study, for example, the infants. On the animal side, we're interested in particularly the kisspeptin neurons. These are these neurons that may be integrating information from both food sources and light sources. But the next kind of grant that we're thinking about is actually one that will be focused really on the pituitary gland, as it's the kind of, the gateway between the brain and the rest of the body.
Yeah, I'm maybe not asking this very well. I understand, well, I should say, I am guessing that applying your research to individuals is problematic. If I'm a long time ago, a 19 or 20-year-old woman who is interested in starting a family, and, I don't think that someone will say, well, don't take a shift work because then you're going to do less. But, but you are finding health trends that are being affected by workers' work.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering how or if that is communicated with your research, how or if that is communicated to a working population.
So specifically for what I've talked about, obviously we're not quite ready to do that.
Right.
But the sort of the pie in the sky for us would be that when women come into the clinic, for example, when they're pregnant, whether they're shift workers or not, we can give them good recommendations for when to eat, for example. And I think that that's actually going to be really impactful for their health because, shift workers aren't actually just, sleeping during the day and eating during the night, working during the night, right? Their schedules are very scattered and disrupted based on family obligations, school, work, etc. So within that kind of sort of scattered schedule, if you can anchor it by giving them simple recommendations, like try and eat at these times when you're awake, as long as it's during the day, do that, or add in an 8-hour fasting or a 10-hour fasting window whenever you can. I think that those can be really helpful.
And so do you see this being communicated in medical offices or places of work or both?
Medical offices primarily because that's going to be the audience that is most receptive to the message at that point. But it could certainly be, so for example, through our outreach program, where we're developing information that can be disseminated to workplaces and workforces. I think that this would be a really great addition to be able to provide to young workers that might be at that kind of transition of parenthood age.
May I jump in, Matt, just as the outreach director? So to specifically address your question, one of the things that's very, I think, exciting and unusual about our institute is that we have these incredible scientists, right? Doing this important work. And then a very large goal of our institute is what we call research to practice. So the idea that once the research is completed and Matt is confident that the results are solid, we then begin to communicate the implications of the research, develop materials, conduct outreach, identify the appropriate target audiences, and get that information out so that women can make the best decisions about timing of eating if they are shift workers. And I think as Stephen Shea said, we are a somewhat unique institute because we span, the basic research all the way to getting these messages out into the workplace.
Thank you.
Have you seen anything with effects on men who are working that kind of shift cycle as well, in regards to infertility? Or, obviously this is looking at female mice.
So there's two pieces to that. So first of all, so for essentially unexplained infertility, the estimate is that it's about half and half. So there's tons of infertility that can be explained by, the ovary is not working, testes aren't working, et cetera. But for that unexplained, the idea is that it's probably about half and half. Within our own work, I showed you the ovulation timing. We're actually quite interested in looking specifically at males versus females, because when I showed the data just showing, you pair them and whether they have pups or not, we've actually only ever studied them when we have active fed with active fed and inactive fed with inactive fed. We haven't actually parsed out. So we know that there's a problem in this ovulation timing with females. We simply just don't know anything about the males. And that's actually aim one of the new grant.
Well, I can imagine the fascinating, cultural environment that we as humans find ourselves, where you would have the cultural friction of having, two individuals that are on different shift schedules, and the stress and, when does romance fit in and all of that in that situation, but also the cultural pressures and stressors of costs, increased childcare costs if you're on shift work, potentially increased earnings, but so I think it's fascinating in this context to understand, okay, well, here's one of the mechanisms that causes this very complicated issue, and then where can that point to additional research or policy guidance of, I know that Bully enforces kind of very strict lunch breaks and how you have to have that structured. And does that float based on when you're starting work, and does that change based on other situations for folks? I know it'll inform a lot of my work as I negotiate contracts for things. So I think that's fascinating, and I appreciate that you're able to do this and hopefully continue in that regard.
And I'll just mention that couples will often self-select one of them to do shift work in order to avoid the childcare costs. And so less financial stress, but more health stress, angst stress, tiredness stress, et cetera.
Yeah. Questions? Back there or online?
Nothing online.
Not looking like it. Great. Well, thank you so much for this fascinating.
Thank you.
All right. So last on the agenda, I just see upcoming meetings update that we have two. November 7th, which is my understanding there'll be some legislative presentations and an insurer panel discussion. And December 5th, we will have more legislative concepts presented and a worker panel discussion. Both of those will be at the L&I building, conference room 260 in Salem, with links provided for online as well.
Yes.
So,
I have to be remote in November.
Okay. Any other questions / good of the order for stuff? I think at this time we would like to conclude the meeting so we can spend some time with community members. So thank you everyone for coming and participating.
Oh, okay. I did have something